it's all over. You know, risk is in everything. And you know what risk is also in? Is in dealing with your suppliers, isn't it?
That's right.
As a matter of fact, that's actually going from a hoverboard to a Segway. Imagine that.
That's very good.
Pretty
You
good.
did that very well.
Not bad. But
there is supplier risk. Exactly.
There is. Yeah.
And it actually, ISO 9001:2015 addresses that.
Addresses that too, no doubt. Yep.
Well, as Randy D'Amico writes, talking about Supplier, in his article, Using ISO Management System Standards to Develop Effective Supplier Partnerships, relationships, the supplier relations between an organization and its suppliers have traditionally been characterized by adversarial activities and posturing in which at least one, or often both parties really, lose. Rather than working together to find ways to create a win-win outcome, buyers use their leverage to force suppliers to absorb costs, to obtain lower prices, and suppliers look for ways to minimize their losses by barely meeting their suppliers' specifications. Unfortunately, writes D'Amico, in a highly competitive marketplace, dysfunctional relationships like this do nothing to support the long-term success of either party. Ideally, the goal of a vendor-supplier relationship is to create and maintain a reliable and trusting partnership that allows both parties to win while also promoting their mutual objectives of continuously improving quality, productivity, and competitiveness. And here to talk about how to use ISO 9001 to develop effective supplier partnerships is Randy D'Amico, Management System Auditor for TUV SUD America. Hi, Randy.
Good morning, Ted.
How you doing this morning?
Well, yourself?
Not too bad. Good. Okay, let's go right into it. ISO 9001:2015, Section 8.4.1 talks about having criteria for evaluating suppliers. How does this tie into the risk-based thinking that ISO 9001:2015 talks about?
Well, it ties in a lot of ways. The first being that every decision an organization makes has to be based around, what are the risks to my organization? And that's no different when choosing suppliers. So the first part of that is, what are the risks with going with this particular supplier? Secondly, then you want to determine the level of control, because one of the requirements of the standard is, you need to determine what level of control you're going to put on your suppliers. So then you have to decide, okay, well, what are the risks of not putting controls on this supplier? And then that will cause you to stratify your supplier list into what I like to call three baskets, if you will. Your key suppliers, the people who, if they go down, you go down. Your critical suppliers, the people who, if they go down, you're going to be scrambling to find a replacement, and then sort of everybody else. So I think you have to really use that risk-based thinking to determine the level of control and what basket you're going to put them in.
And how about when you're not talking, let's say, a direct supplier of a part? How about with outsourcing complete processes as opposed to suppliers that supply just components? Does the standard address that as well?
It does, and the 2015 strengthens those requirements a little bit. 2008 standard just in 4.1 says if you're going to outsource processes, you need to come up with what level of control you're going to use, etc. But the new standard lumps in outsourced processes with the purchase product. It doesn't really separate the two out. It puts it right in there within section that you quoted there, 841, and says if you're going to have product shipped directly from your outsourced process to the supplier, well, then you need to determine the level of control as well. And then it gives you a whole list of things that you need to do. And it says make sure that you determine what part of the quality system they're going to have to adhere to, method for acceptance, and that's a little bit new for the 2015. 2008, I don't want to say it was loose, but it was a lot more relaxed, the requirements. The 2015 standard does strengthen that a little bit, saying that you're going to have to determine all of these things ahead of time, much like you did with purchase product. It doesn't separate those two out anymore. It pulls them in together and says whether it's externally provided services, products, or processes, you have to go through that whole list and determine how they fit into that list of requirements.
Randy, maybe you can give us a couple of quick key action items that a company should take in order to build what you could consider a collaborative supplier relationship.
Certainly. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, is the sharing of information. In the past, if you were purchasing a product that supplier may not have wanted to share with you their secrets, but under the fear that you would then start to do it yourself using their technology, their recipes, etc. So to really build a collaborative partnership, you want to make sure that there's an open flow of information both ways. And that information should include things like acceptance of product. What do you deem acceptable? There should be no question when it comes to whether a product is good or non-conforming. In the past, I've been involved in several organizations where that was a moving target. We were a supplier, and one week this was acceptable, then the next week it wasn't acceptable. That information should be very clearly communicated. The sharing of complaints. If the organization who is selling the merchandise gets a complaint, they shouldn't just issue a scar, lob it over the wall, and count on the supplier to work it out. They should be actively involved. And again, we're talking about key suppliers. When you do your risk analysis to say, these are the folks that I really need to depend on, and you want to make sure that you have that open two-way street, you're sharing information, you're making sure that product acceptance is clearly understood, and that any type of issue that arises is handled quickly and involving both parties. It is not just hopped onto the supplier to figure it out on their own.
Hey Randy, from an auditor's point of view, what for ISO 9001 2015, what are auditors going to be looking for when they go in to audit a company in terms of their supplier relationship and so forth?
We're going to be looking for the same things that we always have. The difference is that I hear a lot of folks saying, well, 2015 doesn't require documentation, and you're right, it doesn't. But I think documentation is easy. I don't suspect that people are going to throw their documents away. So as an auditor, I'll still be looking for the same things. The difference is if they don't have an approved supplier list, well, you can't really issue them a corrective action because there's no requirement to have these type of things documented. However, how do they know who they can buy from? I think it's a lot harder to throw away all your documentation and wing it than it's going to be to just keep what you've got, add to it where need be. But I'll be looking for the same things. As far as the purchase product, there's not much difference. The difference is really going to be on the supplier side for outsourced processes. There is, in my opinion, a strengthening of the requirements for that. In the past, it was very amorphous. Yeah, we send this out to be something or other. And okay, but now I'm going to want to see those controls that the standard requires. Where was the risk analysis done as to how this will affect your process? And show me where now you're sharing that information. Where are the requirements for acceptance? Those type of things. So I think there's a little bit of a strengthening on the outsourced side, and there's going to be some growing pains there as companies get used to that.
Okay. Well, Randy D'Amico, Management System Auditor for TUV SUD America. Randy and I are going to be doing a webinar next week called Shift from Approved Vendor to Strong Supply Chain Partner next Tuesday, November 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm there just to moderate. Randy's going to be the subject matter expert, obviously. And so, Randy, we will catch up with you next Tuesday.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Randy. All right, well, that's our show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Wayne Visser, for joining us via Skype, talk about CSR.
And Randy D'Amico.
Thank you, Randy D'Amico, right there, for joining us via Skype to talk.